Ranjit. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Very lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
My first question is, can you say a little bit about yourself, who you are?
Okay. Well, the manner in which I present myself is, you might say, the manner in which I last experienced in a physical environment. So in that manner I am of Indian birth and of the Sikh beliefs. And for quite some time I ultimately trained as a doctor. So my experiences were predominantly in India, but I also trained and worked for some period of time in London.
What year would that have been?
That would have been in about 1870.
And what made you decide to assist David in the healing practice work?
It is almost quite simple that David and I are not strangers. We have worked together on a number of occasions before. And as many are now discovering, that even when you choose to have an experience in a physical form as a human being in this environment, that those that you might say work with you, watch over you, they are always, of course, those that know you exceedingly well and are very familiar, so that they can assist in your journey and experience here. And as you appropriately even name us as guides, in truth, that is what we attempt to do, to guide. It is part of the way in which we are allowed to do this work. It is, you might say, non-interference, because it is your journey, just as you also chose this journey with a very positive purpose, which will then bring you all the experiences that you require to gain the understanding that you need in order to expand your knowledge and understanding. So as I convey to many that I have the pleasure of working with, this is your journey by your choice, and there is no such thing as failure or mistake. Everything truly has its purpose. The biggest challenges, of course, are no doubt the hardest, but often they are the ones that help us to expand our knowing in a much unforgettable manner, you might say. So in much of the work that we lend ourselves to assist with is encouraging individuals to review elements of their past so that they can identify clearly, without judgment, without anger, to see truly what that experience gave them the opportunity to learn from. Many of these, of course, ultimately come through the emotional level. Many suppress them. Sometimes these events are suppressed by others around the individual. But of course, by suppressing it within, ultimately these things, as you might say, tend to come to the surface in whatever manner that they can, and quite often present themselves as emotional disease, mental disease, or even physical disease, depending on the journey of that particular individual. So most of our work is to help individuals identify with that element of themselves, reconnect with who they are. Because often in a physical environment, with the amount of influence by those around them, whether even it is by loved ones or by people that they grew up with, friends. Certainly the cultures that one is brought up in has a direct influence on how one portrays themselves or presents themselves to others. And what often occurs in these situations is that the individual loses sight of who they are. Many of them unfortunately lose trust and belief in themselves, so that they then become very vulnerable to the influence of others.
So with the illnesses we're seeing today, and there are very many manifesting,
Correct.
is it simply the case that they have lost connection with who they really are, and they haven't come to look at who they really are through that disease, using that disease in order to learn and know themselves? Is that why they're in disease? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
So when you're working with David and David leaves and you're present, when you look at that person on the table, what do you see?
Okay. Almost in every situation, my first point of contact would be to use, of course, David's physical body, so his hand would then place itself in this position, because this is the center point of emotion. So on that level, that connection gives me, you might say, uninterrupted information directly from the source of who that person is. But then, because we do not have the restrictions of a physical being, so therefore we can then see quite clearly the energy flow around the human body. We can see the energy field, so that also all of that information, as we gather that within the first few moments of contact, gives us direct information as to what would truly assist that individual at that moment of time.
So if that individual had cancer, how would that be seen? So when you're receiving the information, are you seeing it in visual images, or are you seeing it in another way?
Seeing it directly, you might say, as I am seeing you at this moment in time, it would be, for me, reality. I would see it as it is.
So if it was cancer, what would it look like?
In general terms, it would look, it does take a number of different forms depending where in the physical body it presents itself. But often it would present itself certainly on the energy level as an area where the energy is either not flowing very well or not flowing at all, depending on how it has been developed and how long it's been developing for. If it is in its early stages, it can possibly just develop and show just an area of restriction, blockages, where the energy is not flowing. The area of colour, which is also a very important vibrational aspect of being able to see. The colour of that area would also be quite dark and not as translucent as it should be. So therefore that would indicate directly where we need to focus much of our work.
And how would you work with a patient who has cancer?
Okay. Again, as I'm sure you're already aware, energy has no boundaries. It has no restrictions. So therefore, by applying energy to that individual, but certainly, again, remember working with the concepts of that individual as they are at that moment, because the energy is a natural source of just life itself. So therefore, we can then focus it on the area where the cancer is. And sometimes you might say even create a pocket of energy within it. So even when we finish the work that we can do, it remains there and continues to work for a period of time. But it is during this work that also it is very valuable and important to understand that this is this person's journey. We must not alter or interfere with it, but we can assist the learning and the knowing, so that during the work that we do, we help to impart information to that individual as to how they can maintain their well-being. So if they have dis-ease in any other level, emotionally, nearly always mentally, we can help them bring their energy flow more back into alignment so that their energy can continue the work that we can assist with. Again, often working with someone for the very first time, I often remark to them, we do nothing to you, we do it with you. This is your journey, your responsibility, but we can and will, if you choose, assist you.
When you say we can and will if you choose, is there cases where the journey may well be to have cancer and pass over?
Correct.
So would you communicate that choice through the higher self? Is that how you would communicate with the other?
There are certain degrees of information and sharing that on the physical connection, because of course being in a physical form, a human being, that we need to communicate directly with that human being, because of course if they are scared, nervous, frightened, to be able to impart useful and appropriate information that will help them gather the confidence to do what they need to do. So verbally we can then communicate on certain aspects of what we can share with them. But you are quite correct. Much of our work is also done on that level of their also higher self, as some people would assume. Because again, we often mention to individuals that there are 4 elements to a human being. There is of course the physical, there is the emotional, the mental, and ultimately the spiritual aspect. That part that some unfortunately are not in direct connection with, but it is always there. There is always that aspect of you that remains in its true form, that sense of who you are. Now it is at this time of changing the environment within this world that this is now starting to be encouraged to come closer, and it will touch everyone.
And what would you regard as the true self?
Okay. The true self is that element of you that is in wholeness, it is in balance of who and what you are. It has, of course, the memory of every experience that you've ever had. And this is something that we do impart to those that require that level of information. That when you have chosen this journey, not always do you bring all of the knowing and abilities that you have with you on this journey. Some you leave with your true self, because of course in order to complete this journey you require to have certain degrees of experience. So aspects of you that would make that journey somewhat, of course, easier, but less informative, you need to leave behind. So that it then brings you to the elements of the aspects of you, yourself, your trueness, into this physical environment so that you can use those abilities that you bring with you to enhance them, to expand them, so that therefore those other elements that you truly already have would then restrict the amount of learning that you would then achieve here. So it is about when people talk about becoming connecting with their higher self, as you become more in tune and your journey is achieving on this level, then that part of you does then come, you might say, closer.
Some people who are hearing this for the first time might say, well, I still don't understand what the higher self is. Are you saying it's God, or are you saying it is a universal intelligence? You know, because human beings like to be able to get a very clear picture in their minds. And of course we're dealing with an unlimited subject here.
Correct.
Could you clarify it further?
Firstly, when I refer to individuals about their higher self, it is that part of them that is, in truth, pure energy. It has no restrictions. It has memory of every experience that it's ever touched upon. So it is their part of them that is complete. You are a part of that that's come into this environment with the purpose of learning. So then when this part of your learning and journey is complete and you no longer need the physical form, you return back to your trueness. You truly become whole. And it is this aspect that we are encouraged to share with many individuals that we work with, because of, unfortunately, the fear of death